Mike McCarthy is on his bullshit early in the season, and the Dallas Cowboys need to try and revive their year going into New York to face the Giants. Tyson, I don't know about you, but I wasn't expecting the Giants to be much of a competitive team this year. But Devin Singletary, Malik Neighbors, and Daniel Jones seem to have figured some stuff out. I don't know. I'm pretty excited about this game, and it should be a pretty good shootout, I think.
They've had their fair share of problems for sure, but they could easily be 2-1 right now, the Giants, and it feels like the Cowboys are just getting destroyed, man. Like basically back-to-back blowouts. Dak's putting up points in the past game, coming from behind, kind of like what we saw in that Packers playoff game where they were just getting blown out, and he put up a bunch of garbage points. The Cowboys are 6-point road favorites. I don't know, man. I kind of think the Giants have a shot in this one. Let's get into this. What is up, guys? Welcome to the Edge DFS. My name is Tyson Smith, joined by Ellie Hernandez. Ellie, we're already in week 4. It feels like we wait all off season. The time is moving so slow, and now we're already at week 4. It's pretty fun. This is a pretty decent Thursday night game. Short week. We got the Cowboys going in to New Jersey against the Giants here. They're 6-point road favorites. I don't know, man. Like, I don't love the Giants, but they got Neighbors. They have Singletary in a pretty good matchup going up against this Cowboy defense. I don't know, man. Like, the salary is going to be tough. There's a lot of guys that we want to get on this slate. But are we going to have to go like Giants, like 4 or 5 stacks in this one just to afford all these guys? We fade CD and Dak in a few lineups. I don't know, man. Like, I've been kind of struggling with hand builds, and even with SaberSim, just looking at some of these builds, they feel a little uncomfortable. I guess I'm not willing to just completely be under the field on any of these studs.
Yeah, I think this is a really fun one, man. I think this is kind of the first one of the season where it's been particularly tight, and we're really going to have game scripts in mind when building. It's the only way I'm going to feel comfortable not getting to some of these studs, because I mean, you can just we were talking about it pre-show. You can make a case for really any of these top 5 to 7 guys. Just because, I mean, really, the Dallas defense has been so bad, and the Giants, they've had some bright spots, but this should be a game that shoots out more than likely. I don't know if we're necessarily going to see a 17-13 type performance from this one.
That's what it feels like. The total is at 45 here. This feels like it hits the over. It feels like both teams can come out and put up some points. There's some injuries to talk about here. We've got some defensive injuries for the Giants. We'll get to that in a second. But what do you make of this, Giants at home +6? Like, this feels like at +210, like, I would just bet on the Giants outright in this game. I mean, am I giving the Giants too much credit here? Like, we've seen the Cowboys just get whooped the last 2 weeks. I don't know what to make of it, man. Like, is this when they turn it around? It feels like CeeDee Lamb is like pissed off on the sidelines. Like, McCarthy is not much of a leader. It feels like this shit can turn sideways real quick in this season for them.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Look, I think this line should probably be a little bit closer. I saw some crazy stat underdogs so far this year that are +5.5 points. Have won outright, like, I don't know, a pretty decent amount of times. But there's something like 14-0, and don't quote me on that. And please don't go make a bet based on that. This is something I'm trying to recall from Twitter. But it kind of gets my point across. I still don't think Vegas necessarily knows some of these teams. The Cowboys certainly don't know who they are at this point. The Giants, I think, are kind of finding some identity. But I don't know if it necessarily should put 6 points, or it should be a 6-point spread. I actually will probably bet on that. That's not terrible. And then I'll put a little bit on the Giants outright. Again, like the Dallas offensive line isn't necessarily good anymore. I don't know who their running backs are. You got Gimli from Lord of the Rings. What is that, Juice Vaughn? And then Rico Dowdle. Like, come on, man. We talked about this last year. I think he had he'd been in the league for 3 years, in the league with air quotes, right? And then with a total of like 7 carries for 13 yards. So, look, man, running backs don't last that long, and if you're trying to make it in like your mid 20s, it's probably past your prime. Sorry, Rico, if you're watching this. I'll try and be nice when we actually talk about running backs. But my point is I don't think the Cowboys know who they are. And Mike McCarthy is simply not a good coach when the team doesn't have an identity. Like that's just he does not work out. His identity has been, or his team has been saved a lot by having elite quarterbacks and kind of just elite talent on the team. And we've seen it just fall apart too many times. I don't want to rant so early into the show, but that's really kind of how I feel about this game, man. I think the Giants do have a shot in this, especially, after they got their ass whipped last year.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys have owned the Giants in the last, I think it's like 16 or 17 matchups or something like that. They've won one game or something. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but like they've lost 6 out of the last 7. The Giants have. So, and the controversy this week is Jerry Jones coming out and saying they couldn't afford Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry is quoted saying he had interest, but they never got back to him. So it's like they're going all in, and yet they're waiting a few hours before the first game and the season starts to sign their quarterback when they could have done this earlier in the year. They could have gotten a guy like Derrick Henry. It feels like things are going downhill. I mean, if they come out and put up a dominating performance here, maybe, okay, they're turning it around. It took them a few weeks. I just don't see it. I think they can put up points, but I don't think their defense can stop anybody. When it comes to weather, we don't really have to worry about anything. Tomorrow, I don't even know if I'll have power tomorrow. I'm here in like southeast Georgia. I might get annihilated by this hurricane, so hopefully I can watch this game. But when it comes to the Northeast, they're seeing maybe a little bit of rain. Who knows, man? Like I'm not going to take too much stock into just a small chance of rain with 8-mile-per-hour winds. Not too worried about that. Let's get into our injuries here.
Yeah, just pain. It was pain everywhere.
All right, so quite a bit of things to talk about here for the Giants. This is a big deal, and while I was doing research on the slate up until the point where both of their corners were ruled out, I thought maybe the Giants, I was going to get heavy Giant stacks, but now I'm just like, dude, I'm going to have to get to some CD Lamb. I'm going to have to get to some of this pass game because while the Giants, pass rush has been pretty impressive. I believe they had 8 sacks last week. It's been pretty impressive. They've got a bunch of studs on that line. Their corners are banged up. Their secondary is pretty banged up, and having CD Lamb in the slot when you don't have really a true slot corner at this point, it's kind of up in the air who's even going to play in the slot and who's going to be matched up. It feels like this is some big news that maybe people aren't going to be paying attention to as much. Adoree Jackson, calf injury out. Drew Phillips, injury out. That's kind of a big deal here. And then the other news here is Darius Slayton being questionable. Now, he's vastly outsnapped Jalen Hyatt this year, which is a little surprising. You'd think that Hyatt would get some more run, considering he's such a big play type guy. Wearing number 13 out there. We saw, flashes last season in his rookie year. If Slayton is out, and he's questionable with a thumb injury, he was limited participation. If he's actually out, I think that really opens up a lot of interesting builds. And guess what? Jalen Hyatt's $600. So in order to fit in all these studs that we really want and not have to completely punt at captain, it feels like getting a $600 guy in there that people might not be paying attention to as much might be an interesting option. Anything to talk about here with the Giants injury report?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head with Slayton. That's the biggest thing to watch. But I think we saw the other night too, though. I mean, what was a $600 tight end? He was 15% owned. You needed him to be in the optimal. So you might even be playing Hyatt regardless, but it is an important one.
There's some doubtful for some of these secondary guys for the Cowboys. It doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. There's not really much else to talk about here. This Deron Bland is out. So we got Diggs out there. Gonna have Gonna have an interesting matchup if he's going head to head with Malik Neighbors. It's gonna be interesting, man. It's gonna be interesting for sure. All right, so let's just talk about a couple other things before we get into this breakdown here. So, looks like Diggs has been primarily on the right side as the corner. Actually, week 2, he was jumping back and forth. Sorry, I should move over there. It seems like he'll probably be, one-on-one with Neighbors, but we'll see. This line matchup here is interesting. Obviously, the Cowboys still have some solid pieces, but they have a rookie center and a rookie left tackle. This Guyton guy has, I believe he's like a penalty machine. So, I mean, you've got Lawrence, you've got Burns, you got Thibodeau, who had 11.5 sacks last year. He hasn't really turned it on this year. But it feels like Burns going up against Guyton is a matchup to look out for. And you got Lawrence here going up against a rookie center. This really jumps out to me as not only their run game is cooked, but, Dak could get tore up this week. And the Giants defensive coordinator, is not typically a guy who blitzes a lot. But he blitzed, I believe, in over 50% of his snaps last week against Deshaun Watson. They completely caught him off guard. So we know that traditionally, Dak is pretty good against the blitz. So we'll see if they change up their game plan and just, make this a 4-man rush. But this year he hasn't been very good against the blitz. So I don't know what to expect. I do think this is a mismatch, though, this Giants defensive line. I think they can get to Dak. Even more so, allowing me to basically just fade Zeke and Dowdle. And look, yeah, they could come out and get a goal line carry. They could get a couple dump off passes and maybe make the optimal. But if Zeke Elliott at 56 years of age running a 5.6 40, if he beats me, if Rico Dowdle beats me, I'm fine with that. But I would rather not waste those lineups on this run game that's pretty terrible. I laid out some of these matchups here potentially. So listen to a couple different podcasts today. Looks like Deonte Banks is going to be outside. Like there's rumors that he could maybe shadow CD in the slot. If CD's out wide, maybe we see Banks out there, who's probably their strongest corner right now. But most likely Banks doesn't really play in the slot. So what do we see here? Do we see Cordell Flott in the slot, kind of shadowing CD? Trey Hawkins here. Is he lining up outside? And then you got Isaiah Simmons, who is somehow a slot corner. When did that happen, Ellie? What the hell? Going back with the Cardinals here, when did Isaiah Simmons become a corner? If he's on the field guarding CeeDee Lamb, that's a touchdown. So look, I know there's a whole bunch of talk here, but when it comes to matchups here, this is one of the reasons why I'm like, dude, I'm gonna have to get to a ton of CeeDee Lamb. Even if I think that the Giants can win this game and maybe put up a lot of points, I think CeeDee Lamb's gonna get involved. There's no way to overthink it, and it feels like Brandon Cooks is always one of these guys on these showdown slates that people forget about. And he gets a nice little corner to the end zone touchdown. He gets a couple receptions. He ends up being in the optimal. I don't know, man. Like this Cowboy offense is going to throw the ball a ton, man. Like we're probably going to see Dak throw the ball 40 times. So what do some of these matchups mean to you? Like what's jumping out to you?
I mean, just in general, like I think that the defensive line matchup is going to be the most important. I like what you had to say about Dak being under pressure, but that's where some of the explosive plays come from with Dak Prescott, right? Is the busted pocket, him having to roll out and scramble a little bit and hit CeeDee Lamb up the seam, right? Jalen Tolbert, Kavonte Turman up the field. So I kind of think. Unfortunately, just makes me kind of like the shootout theme a little bit more and just make it's still just kind of difficult, dude. We're going to have to find some value because I everything we talk about makes me think that there's going to be a lot of points scored, man.
Last thing before we get into the breakdown, you sent me this earlier, Ellie. This is let me read Ian's tweet here. PPR fantasy points per game allowed, ranks by position. 32 is bad defense, 1 is good defense. So if we look at Dallas, we know their defense is struggling. They're the worst team in the league against the run. Where is Dallas? They're 32 right here.
7 down.
Yeah, so against the quarterback, 27th. Against the running back, 32nd. This feels like a massive Singletary captain type day. This feels like a Singletary in the flex. This feels like a going heavy on Singletary, especially considering his price. He's been the guy. There hasn't really been like massive opportunities for the backups on this team. He just feels like the way to go. I mean, this is just obvious. Like everybody right now, we're 3 weeks in, going into the 4th week. Everybody goes, okay, who are the worst defenses? What are the best matchups? And you think of Dallas right away. You know, we saw last week the Ravens absolutely crushed them. We saw Alvin Kamara score. What was it? Was that his 4 touchdown game? I believe it was.
Yeah.
So this is Singletary time, right? Is that just too obvious? Are we just setting ourselves up for failure in one of these like 6-point Singletary games? I don't even care. I'm just going to play him.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm just gonna play him. This isn't one you necessarily need to overthink. I understand you had Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara. That's a much different talent type at running back playing against Dallas, but they're awful, dude. So yeah, I think I'm gonna have a lot of Devin Singletary.
All right, let's get into this breakdown. Let me pull up SaberSim. We're gonna go position by position here. Let's hit the breakdown. Break it down. All right, so let's start with quarterback. So Dak Prescott, 10.4K. Danny Dimes. We're calling him Danny Dimes right now, man. 9,400. I feel like, man, he gets a lot of crap. I don't think he's the problem this year. I really don't. I think he's looked pretty good. And getting him a guy like Neighbors that he can rely on and throw the ball to like freaking 12 to 15 times a game is clearly working out for him. He's got a little bit of rushing upside. I don't see how you like. Obviously, it's all based on the game script for your lineup, but it's hard to not play Dak in this game. It feels like he's going to put up points whether they win or lose. The hard part we're going to have to decide here is Daniel Jones. We're going to have to fade CeeDee Lamb or Singletary or Neighbors if we want to get Dak and Daniel Jones in a lineup together. So, what are we doing here with the quarterbacks, man? I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's not too many game scripts that I think you're going to need to fade both of them. So I think we can just start by kind of ruling that strategy out. But outside of that, man, I think you have to have a pretty healthy exposure to both. And maybe you get different by going over the field on a guy like Daniel Jones. And I don't know, dude, Dak, even then, like maybe I might end up with a lot more 2 quarterback builds and kind of fading some of the skill players. I know that like what CD can do, for example, but what Dak Prescott was the reason why they were able to get back into that game last week, right, against Baltimore. I understand it was garbage time, but who's going to reap the benefits of garbage time? Everybody. And then Dak Prescott throwing for 350, right? So, look, man, I'm going to have a lot of Dak, and I think I'm going to have a lot of Daniel Jones too. I think you kind of just got to bite the bullet and figure out something else. Be comfortable punting. But I also like Daniel Jones at captain a little bit
Yeah.
with that rushing upside against that terrible defense, man. There's a real world where, yeah, if Devin Singletary kind of has a tough game, Daniel Jones could be the leading rusher. And Devin Singletary's look great all season long, right? But maybe it is a Daniel Jones night. So I don't know. I like Daniel Jones. I think you get both these guys as much as you can, whatever you're comfortable with. You're going to have to make some tough choices, but I think you can also consider Daniel Jones a captain.
If, in SaberSim, I don't like to do a ton of rules, and I don't know that I will in this one. But, like, if you're just using a traditional optimizer, if you're hand building and you just want some rules of thumb, like, it feels like you got to do min one of these quarterbacks, and you got to do, out of the 3 studs, Neighbors, CeeDee Lamb, and Singletary. Feels like you got to do a min of 2 of those. I don't know. I mean, that just feels like, and then just kind of rotate out the combinations. That just kind of feel like how it's supposed to go here. Let's go to running back. Let's start with the Giants. Saquon tearing it up. The GM looks like an idiot. He was on camera on HBO. We basically all got to see that the Giants didn't really want Saquon back. Saquon, if they would have just paid him, I don't know the reasons why. Maybe they thought he was over the hill. Maybe they didn't want to pay for a running back that's relatively injury prone. Singletary's done good though. He's 8,200. It feels like this team is like scaredly trying to play well, or at least the GM is praying that the running back plays well with all this Saquon domination for the Eagles. But I don't know how you don't play Singletary at 8,200. I think he's a great captain option. You get a little bit of salary savings, but you get a ton of volume. Tyrone Tracy Jr. is 2,800. He hasn't really been super involved. I don't think I'm interested in probably either of these backups here, even as a flyer. I think I'm just going to jam in Devin, right?
Yeah, 100%. Devin Singletary's been getting so much of the workload that I think if you're playing the running back position here, you're playing Devin Singletary. You don't need the other two. And if you're not playing Devin Singletary, then you probably need to be playing Daniel Jones, kind of just like we said under that other segment. But Devin Singletary's looked great, man. And he had over 100 rushing yards again last week. Like it's kind of impressive. I really thought this team was going to struggle a little bit more, kind of losing Saquon Barkley. Maybe it helped Daniel Jones' confidence, knowing this is actually his team now. So maybe that's opening it up for the other players. And Devin Singletary has been reaping the benefits of whatever connection they've got with Neighbors and Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
But yeah, play him at captain, play him. I'm probably going to have close to 100%.
I kind of want to skip over this, but we got to talk about it here. Zeke Elliott, 6,200. Rico Dowdle, 6,400. Gimli, 1,200. Hunter Lepke, 800, a fullback. I like I said earlier, I'm just going to fade all these guys. At least Elliott and Dowdle. I don't think I'm going to get to any Deuce Vaughn or the fullback. I don't want to play them. I don't want to waste any lineups, any combinations of players, especially at that price. I just don't want to waste my time. And I feel like, Zeke is coming in 35% owned in the flex. I mean, that's insane. If he's 35% owned, 100% unchecking him. Dowdle's coming in at 25% owned. So you're telling me that, probably not going to be a lot of people playing these guys together. So, if you just guessed here, you're telling me that I can get, 58% of lineups if both of these guys suck ass just dead. I'm fading them. Like I said, and if they score a touchdown, if Zeke Elliott falls in the end zone and has, 10 rushes, 2 touchdowns, and 25 yards, oh well. I'm closing my laptop, moving on. Do you agree?
All I have to say is I am more likely to play one of Hunter Lepke or Deuce Vaughn than I am to play Rico Dowdle or Ezekiel Elliott.
I agree. All right, let's move on to wide receivers here. So CeeDee Lamb's 11.8K. These Giants corners are banged up. Maybe they step up. Maybe this defensive coordinator schemes, confuses Dak. I just don't see it happening. I think Dak puts up a 300-yard game, and a lot of guys get involved. And if they overcompensate and they shade that safety or whatever they're going to do with CeeDee Lamb to try to shut him down, these other guys can step up too. We know about Brandon Cooks, 6,800. I feel like every time we do one of these showdown slates, we talk about Brandon Cooks a little bit. And, he's coming in with some medium to low ownership, and he scores 2 touchdowns or a touchdown and 60 yards. And at 6,800, I feel like he's the same price as Zeke and Dowdle almost. Like, I'm going to play Brandon Cooks every time, even though there's a little bit of risk there because, he gets cold sometimes. But when he breaks out, he has these big games. And I'm not talking like 30-point games. I'm sure he has a couple, but, he's one of these guys I feel like you mix into the captain a little bit. Because of that price, and then just fit him into the flex, above the field, in my opinion. He's projected around 22%. Maybe I get to 35% or something like that. Jalen Tolbert's 5,800. He scored a touchdown last week, I believe. He's looked pretty good. I believe he's had over 10 fantasy points, or I think one game he had like 9.8, but he's right around that 10-plus fantasy point every game this season. Kevontae Turpin, we know what to expect from him. He's 4K. He's kind of one of these guys I wish was a little cheaper, but because he scored last week, he's boosted up a little bit as well. These are really the only guys I'm interested in playing. We know about CeeDee Lamb. We're going to play a ton of CeeDee Lamb. I'm probably going to get to an okay amount at captain. I think I like Neighbors and Singletary more in the captain than some of these Giants guys, but he'll be in the flex a lot. But let's talk about Brandon Cooks, Tolbert, and Turpin. What are your thoughts on these guys?
I'm gonna be forcing my exposure to these guys. I want pieces of the wide receiver core. I'm with you. I think we should be fading pretty much the running back position for Dallas. I love Dak, and I love this offense trying to stay competitive or get going. Obviously, that means CD's in play, but Brandon Cooks, obvious beneficiary of overemphasizing coverage on CD Lamb, right? Jalen Tolbert, who he's been getting involved, and your point on Devontae Turpin was dead on. And I think you can kind of be willing to play him, even at that price, just because of what's going on with Dak in the offense, right? These are all guys that could easily benefit from bad offensive line play, broken plays, busted plays turn into busted coverage all the time, right? That's what Dak's bread and butter is. That's what makes him. It's kind of back with Dak's going through the Tony Romo thing where everyone hyped him up so much, nobody liked him, and now it's like I think you guys are kind of underrating him a lot.
Yeah.
He's a good quarterback, man. He's going to go put up. He can easily put up 350 plus yards, and they don't have a roundabout offense to kind of help support that. So he's the one who's going to have to keep them in the game. So I think you have to have one pass catcher at minimum from Dallas to stack with Dak.
Yeah, and people are pissed that they paid Dak. Well, what are you going to do? Just is Cooper Rush your future quarterback? Like, if he didn't get paid,
still can't stop the run.
if he didn't get paid, somebody was going to pay him a ton. So you got to keep him. I mean, it's just the going price for quarterbacks. We see Trevor Lawrence getting massive contracts. You got to lock these guys down. And I don't. Do I think Dak is like a top 5 quarterback? No, but I think in the right situation he could be. He's got talent. I don't know why we're talking about quarterbacks here, but just a lot of sports talk radio throughout the week, and I hear a lot of people calling in, and it just drives me nuts. All right, let's move on here. Let's go to the other side. So, obviously we got Malik Neighbors, who's a stud. We know that. We know that him and Daniel Jones are going to connect. If Trevon Diggs can somehow shut down Neighbors, well, hey, good for him. I'm still going to play a ton of him. I don't really care who's going against him. If he's getting 15 targets a game, you got to play him. Wan'Dale Robinson is a guy I really like at 4,800. He's been getting a ton of targets. Let me look at his targets here, actually, real quick. How much is he? 4,800. So week 1, 12 targets. Week 2, 4. Last week, 8. He's got a touchdown in week 2. He's $4,800, dude. And from what I could tell, he's actually cheaper. He's been getting cheaper each week. So you're talking about a guy who probably is not going to get a lot of downfield targets. He's going to get 5-6 yard receptions, and he's going to stack those. And at 4,800, I know we have Brandon Aubrey on this slate, and he's probably close to the same price. But Wan'Dale Robinson, 4,800, man, I like him as like a kind of a second to last piece before you punt. Darius Slayton, questionable. We talked about this in the beginning. He's 3,200. If he plays, I have no interest really in him. He's on the field a ton. It just, with all those mouths to feed, when you got Wan'Dale Robinson getting a ton of targets and you got Malik Neighbors getting a shit ton of targets, they're not going to be able to get the ball to Slayton as much. But if he's out, a guy like Jalen Hyatt at 600, it's risky. I mean, there's a reason why he's $600. He hasn't really been on the field a ton. I think Slayton's like out snapping him like times 6 or something, 6 or 8 times the amount of snaps for Slayton compared to Hyatt. And the interesting thing about Slayton is I'm pretty sure he's a free agent. I'm pretty sure he's probably out after this year. So maybe they don't like Hyatt. Maybe he hasn't been putting up a good training camp. I don't know what it is. But if he's starting for Slayton at $600, I don't care, man. I might just massively jam him in at $600 in order to be able to fit these studs in who I just don't see a ton of pass for them failing. So what do you think about these guys? I mean, Neighbors is obvious. I think we're both in agreement. We're going to get to a ton of him. I probably will have more of Neighbors than CeeDee Lamb at captain, and maybe right around the same in the flex. But any interest in Wan'Dale Robinson with all those targets? And what are we thinking with Jalen Hyatt here versus Slayton?
I do have one thing to say about Malik Neighbors. I think he might be a top 12 wide receiver right now. Like right now in the NFL. I was watching him, man. Like, damn, dude is good. Anyways, Wan'Dale Robinson, he was essentially the guy that they brought in to replace Kadarius Toney. Felt comfortable getting rid of him, even while Wan'Dale was moderately injured. So now that he's healthy in an offense that is Daniel Jones's, whatever, right? Like he is the guy running this offense. Hey, Robinson can get involved in so many different ways, and I think that he's gonna rely on him, continue to rely on him, right? So yeah, I think you got to play him at 4,800, especially if you want to maybe think about baiting Malik Neighbors in a couple lineups. I think you will want a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson because he probably will be one of the immediate guys to pick up some additional volume if they're just overextending to shut down Neighbors. But outside of that, man, I don't like Darius Slayton. Jalen Hyatt, I'm just gonna close my eyes and play him. It's $600. Right, he's projecting for 1.5 points, almost 2 points. And what were the running backs for? They're 6,200 and projecting for like 5. Right, that's crazy, man. I think like any lineup where you need to save 6,800 or 6,400, fade the running backs from Dallas and put in Jalen Hyatt. Yeah, that's kind of where I'll probably start. Right now, he's probably one of the better value plays. I think. I mean, who knows how much he's going to get involved? But at $600, like I think he gives you the flexibility to jam in some of these studs that you kind of need to have.
Yeah, I mean, if Slayton plays, like I'm probably not going to get to much Hyatt. I still might just because Slayton is injured and he's questionable. Maybe Hyatt sees more snaps. But if Slayton's out, I'm going to jam a ton of Hyatt in and just hope he gets one long opportunity down the field. And when he does, he connects. Look, dude, I think it's just very low risk with a guy like him because if he gets a 0 and allows you to get 5 dudes in the rest of your lineup that are viable and aren't just punts and you get a high floor, you're not going to win if he gets you a 0, but you can at least kind of break even or get close to breaking even with a handful of zeros at a guy at $600. All right, let's move on to tight end. So we got Theo Johnson at 2,400, Daniel Bellinger at 1,600. I mean, this is a showdown slate, so we're going to have to play some of these tight ends. Theo Johnson is projected to be 6% owned. Daniel Bellinger is projected to be 4% owned. So these are guys that I'm just going to get with the field on, they're just not very good plays. There's no reason to go massive unless you got some great feeling about Theo Johnson. I just don't see it happening. But I'll get some exposure, right?
Yeah, they'll be in my player pool. That's about all I got to say here. I'm not going to go out of my way to get to him.
All right, so let's go to Dallas. Jake Ferguson came back, had a good week last week. 7K. Schoonmaker at 1K with Ferguson out. He looked pretty good. This team does run an okay amount of 12 personnel. They like to have 2 tight ends on the field. At least they did last year. It feels like Schoonmaker at 1,000 still kind of in play on a showdown slate. He's projected to be 2% owned. If you get 5-6% of him, like as just a flyer, you're not really risking a ton. But he's $1,000. What are we doing with Jake Ferguson here, man? It feels like if you fade CeeDee Lamb or you fade Neighbors in the lineup or whatever, you could probably go down and get Ferguson and have more of a balanced lineup. He's projected to be 30% owned in the flex. I just don't know if I'm hand building, how I'm going to get to a ton of Jake Ferguson.
Yeah, I think you kind of just leave him in your player pool and just get close to the field if you're doing MME, if you're hand building. I think maybe the ideal way to use him might be a lineup with him at captain, just a build that you're comfortable with that way. And then maybe just doing other stuff, right? Because there's obviously other guys you want to get to. But he's going to be in play. Again, I think we don't want to overcomplicate it. If your quarterback can throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, like just play guys that'll catch the ball,
Absolutely. I think he's, absolutely in play. And I want to make sure I don't forget about him, or I want to make sure that, SaberSim, if I have to set a min exposure on him just to make sure I'm getting to him, because he's one of these guys that can absolutely go off. All right, let's go to kickers and defense. So, I saw some stat, I forgot what it was, but Brandon Aubrey is outscored like most of the wide receivers and a handful of running backs. I mean, he's probably the best kicker in the league coming over from the USFL from a few years ago. He's 5K. He's probably going to be pretty high owned. You probably have to expect at least 25%. And, maybe there's some folks out there who are feeling weird and stupid and put him at captain. But I think I'm not going to not play Brandon Aubrey because he can put up 25 fantasy points and wreck your day. Greg Joseph is filling in for Graham Gano, so I don't know how reliable he is at 4,400. Cowboys defense 5,400. Why are they 5,400? Why? Giants defense at 3,600. I'd rather play Giants defense. I don't know that I'm going to get to a ton of defense, and I'm probably not going to get to a lot of like kicker defense, and I'm not getting into any double defense. I feel like this is just one-offs with depending on the stacks. But what are we doing here, man? To me, I feel like this is a shootout. I feel like this hits the over. We know that Daniel Jones can make some mistakes, but for 5,400 for the Dallas Cowboys defense, hell no, I ain't playing them.
So for kickers, defense, go back to the old rule. Probably don't need both, but one is fine. As far as Brandon Aubrey, yeah, I get it. He's 5K. I don't know if this is necessarily the best matchup for him. I'll end up getting some decent exposure to him, but to your point, I don't think you need to be targeting him to any capacity, right? This game, again, we think it's going to be a shootout. I think there's going to be touchdowns more than field goals. So that's kind of how I'll be building. Greg Joseph, 4,400, he's fine. Let's put it this way. I'll still play both these guys over lineups with Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott, right? I might even, in fact, go down to the Cowboys defense instead of the running backs. But I think I agree with you. Giants defense at 3,600 isn't terrible. A scoop and score might be enough to be the value you need on this slate. But again, I don't think you get crazy. Don't overthink that. That's probably more for 150 max than 20 max or a hand-built single entry. I'm not going to have much of the defenses. I'll probably be focusing on the op. It's just to just shoot out.
And I mean, this is an outdoor game. This isn't at Jerry World. For Aubrey, there's potentially a little bit of sprinkle, a little bit of rain going on. Is he going to be kicking 55, 58 yarders all the time? Do the Cowboys stall out? Do they actually punch it in? If there's a game script where you want to play him and fade Dak or something, I don't hate it. Like I'm not going to not play Brandon Aubrey, but he's not a priority for me, especially considering a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson is $200 cheaper, and I feel like has a lot of upside as well. All right, let's get into our captain. This is our favorite captain on DraftKings. This is our crown their ass.
Now, if you want to crown them, then crown their ass.
Ellie, you're going Singletary. I'm going Neighbors. It's just it feels obvious with Singletary. Good matchup. He's getting a ton of volume. He's not really splitting carries with anybody. He's getting involved a little bit in the pass game. They're handing the ball off. If you're the Giants and you don't give him 20 touches in this game against the Cowboys run defense, you're an idiot. Hey, and maybe that's the truth. Maybe Dayball thinks he's too smart. I don't think so. I think he's just going to get involved unless Singletary gets injured. I don't see how he's not in the optimal. I'm sure somebody will quote me after he gets 3 fantasy points. To me, Neighbors, he's just getting a ton of action, man. It's either between him or Singletary for me, and then followed by CD. All right, let's go to our. I don't even know what we can call this at this point.
No other than Steve Cow. I'm like, come on, bro.
So these are guys that you are going to play, but you probably shouldn't. Ellie, do you have a Kimes cranked out play of the night?
I guess it would probably have to be. I'm probably stealing yours, man. So I'm sorry, Jalen Hyatt at this point. And I think I kind of was a little bit too aggressive by saying that I was going to have a bunch of them. When I say a bunch of a $600 guy to anybody who's watching, I'm talking like 10%, right? I'm not going to. That's still double the field for a guy that's $600. But I like him. I think he's fine. And again, he's better than some of the other value that we have. If you get 2 points from a 2,400 player, you're kind of screwed.
I mean, I think if Slayton is out, I think his ownership will be in the 15% range, just because we've seen him do things in the past. And if he's going to be on the field, I feel like his ownership will be way higher than it is currently if we see Slayton out. And for me, like, if I'm thinking the dude is 15% owned, I'm going to get 30% of him. I just don't care. Like, it's just $600, man. I just like him. It's risk. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to fade the running backs for Dallas. I'm going to go heavy on a punt play like Hyatt because of all these different guys I need to get in my lineup. I just feel like that's the way I'm going to play it this slate. All right, let's build some lineups, dude. So this will not be fun to hand build these lineups. Thankfully, I have SaberSim. And if I'm not super comfortable hand building on a slate, some slates I do. Some slates I feel like I've got it down. This one is not going to be that slate. I'm just going to I'm going to set up my thoughts in SaberSim beforehand, and I'm going to crunch. I'm going to contest sim, and I'm going to put those contests those lineups into the best contests for those lineups. Let's build a cashy sort of single entry, like, maybe 100 people or less, or 200 people or less. Kind of, I think that's maybe like the $100, a couple hundred people. Let's build a lineup for that. So who are we gonna throw in at captain for that? Do we want to go like Dak Prescott? Maybe.
Sure. I mean, I think it might be Singletary, man. Like, he might be the cash play.
Yeah.
But let's
Yeah.
try with a more expensive guy first.
Let's try a Dak. All right. So if we probably want to play CeeDee Lamb. Let me just start this off by saying we're probably going to be able to only get one of these top three guys here: the Neighbors, Jones, and Singletary. So do we just go with Neighbors and get all that volume? Do we go with Singletary? Like, this is why it sucks, and this is why you're probably right. Singletary might be the guy. So who do we pick here?
I think maybe. Well, let's just start with Neighbors, because we can always go back down to the other guys.
All right, so we got 11K for 2 spots. So unless or for 3 spots. I mean, this is crazy. So we definitely can't get Singletary. We can't get Daniel Jones. We can't get Ferguson. Not that I would probably get him anyways in this lineup, but we're gonna have to just go down. Maybe Brendan Aubrey.
Yeah.
And then,
well, no, maybe we go Greg Joseph. I know we want. Well, it's cash, but it. I mean, what other Giants are we going to feel comfortable playing unless we're just going to do a Dallas onslaught? You know what? Let's do that. Go ahead and put in Aubrey, and I guess we'll see what we're comfortable with.
I am comfortable playing Robinson, Wan'Dale Robinson, in this lineup.
In Neighbors or with Neighbors and cash.
I think so. This is where all the targets are going. It just is. And if we're not playing Singletary, these are probably the next 2 guys that are going to be getting looks. But look, I mean, if Hyatt's starting, you're going to throw him in here without Daniel Jones? It just doesn't make sense. So, Prescott probably, it feels like we have to not play Neighbors and we have to play Singletary here in the flex.
Yeah.
And then you got to go down and you got to get Aubrey maybe. I mean, do we want to get, we just said don't do this, but, for cash or single entry, do we want to get Joseph in here too?
I mean, I actually, can we do Joseph and Wan'Dale? Does that work?
We can.
I don't hate that for cash.
So you're not playing Neighbors, you're not playing Daniel Jones, but you got Dak Prescott, the captain, you got CeeDee Lamb, Singletary, both kickers, Wan'Dale Robinson, who's going to get targets. Probably not have a huge game, but he's probably gonna get you 10 fantasy points. I don't like it. I'm gonna let SaberSim figure out these single entries for me. All right, so let's start with Singletary. Let's do some GPP builds. I do feel like single entry, it's probably best to play Singletary too. It's hard to say that though with guys like CeeDee Lamb and Neighbors and Dak Prescott on the slate. It's just the salaries are just pretty interesting for this one. All right, so Singletary at captain. Do we fade Daniel Jones in this one?
Call me crazy, but let's fade CD and let's go Neighbors, Prescott, and Jones if it's possible.
It is possible. Look at that. You could do Ferguson, Brandon Cooks. You could leave some money on the table.
Let's go.
That's not terrible. Would you
Throw
Ferguson?
in Brandon Cooks.
Okay. Either one. Oh wait, I'm an idiot. We got 2 spots left.
How much for 2 spots?
7,100. That seemed awesome. I was like, yes, we're good. Nope, we're not.
All right, here, throw in. Well, I guess throw in Brandon Aubrey. Well, I would like a pass catcher from Dak if we can. Throw in Jalen Tolbert or some shit. Yeah, that's
You want
fine.
Turpin or Tolbert? Probably Tolbert.
Yeah. What does that give us?
It gets us Jalen Hyatt.
You know what? Jalen Hyatt. If you wanted, and then if you're in the big GPP, like I also don't know if I like $1,200 Deuce Vaughn. I know if we're gonna fade running backs, like he's a guy that I might be okay taking a stab on if they're playing from behind, right? Dak Prescott has to dump off a pass or two. Deuce Vaughn. I don't know. He might be getting some 2-minute run. I mean, you see that one reception, 2 targets.
Yeah,
and that's not crazy, but you know, 1.8 points, 2.4 points at 1,200. Anyways, that probably talked way too much about him. Talking myself into one of the goddamn running backs.
What if we? Man, is it too crazy to fade Neighbors and CD in this lineup?
No, it's not. I actually think you're fine. What if we take out Neighbors and put in Wandale?
Yeah. So let's put Wandale in there. So now we got plenty. So now we can go with like a Ferguson, we could go with Dak Prescott. We can put Ferguson. No, we can't get Cooks as well.
We'll put in Fergie, and then Ferguson and Tolbert. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't hate it. Like, it's not sexy, but
Yeah. I mean, it's not. That's for sure. I feel like with Singletary though, there are options. You're just gonna have to fade one of the studs or 2 of the studs. In this case, let's fade. Let's get rid of Daniel Jones. So let's put Singletary back in there. Let's put Dak. You want to put Neighbors in?
yeah.
So let's do this. Let's go Singletary and Neighbors, and then let's run it back with 4 Cowboys.
Let's do it. I mean, let's throw in Ferguson. We can always go down to Cooks if we don't like him.
Ferguson. I mean, we could play Cooks too. What does that get us? Gets us a absolute punt or Jalen Hyatt. But let's stick with this 2-4 build. So instead of Cooks,
Deuce Vaughn.
let's go with Tolbert. 3,700. No, we're not gonna do that. Aubrey. 4,500. This doesn't get us the 2-4. You can go Turpin here too. This is without Dak. Or not Dak, but CD. So Singletary, Neighbors, and then you got Prescott, Ferguson, Aubrey, Turpin. I don't love it, but these are kind of the weird builds that you'll see sometimes, like winning these GPPs. All right, let's build one more. You want to go Neighbors, or do you want to try something weird? You want to do like a Brandon Cooks? Just try out some of these cheaper guys.
Let's actually do a Ferguson captain. Why not?
All right, Fergie. Pair him up with Dak.
Yeah, and then let's fade Daniel Jones. Let's go Neighbors, Singletary.
Are we gonna fade Lamb too? We have to.
Can we afford him?
Not with Singletary.
Then what do you want to do? You want to pull out Singletary and throw in CD too?
Let's just try it.
I don't hate it.
Let's go. Okay, I know we don't have Daniel Jones, but let's go. Let's just
Do
see. You want to go Hyatt or Wandale?
Let's start with Wandale. I kind of don't mind Hyatt though if we need to punt.
Now we're looking at
Yeah.
Bellinger, Deuce Vaughn. Let's go with Hyatt if Slayton's out.
Yeah.
5,900. Now we got some options here, so we can get Tolbert in here too. Ferguson, we're fading the running backs. Prescott, Ferguson, CeeDee Lamb, Tolbert, run it back with Neighbors and Hyatt. That's interesting. What'd you learn, man?
It's going to be tough building. You're going to have to you're going to have to fade probably two guys that you're uncomfortable with fading.
Yeah.
And more than any other slate I think we've had this season, you're just going to have to use game scripts. Whatever you think you're going to have happen, you just need to build a lineup that way. So if you're building by hand, good luck, I guess.
Yeah. It's that, those three dudes, minus the quarterbacks, CD, Neighbors, Singletary. Which one are you fading? Unless you go no quarterbacks, which you can do, but I'm not going to do it.
No.
Which one of those guys are you fading, or which two of those guys are you fading if you want to go two quarterbacks? So that sucks. That's why I kind of like a guy like Jalen Hyatt. Just blasting him in if Slayton's out, and getting to a lot of him, it just allows you to be able to fit those high floor type guys who are just going to be involved. What's your score prediction for this one, man?
I'm going to go 37-35 New York. I don't know how I got 37, but I'm going to roll with it.
31-30 Giants. I think we're both taking Giants on this one. That's crazy. Let's go Giants, I guess, right? Let's see a collapse for the Cowboys. Sorry, Cowboys fans. We'll see you guys later.